Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the more survivalists, and in this case answering a question that I got in my previous video regarding how long do respirators, face masks last, filters for your gas mask, how often should you be replacing them? Right, very valid question. Before I go on with this, someone was asking me about my survival knife. Yes, I've designed a survival knife. It's being made by Aitor, a very well-known Spanish knife company. They've made some of the more iconic survival knives, so I'm very proud about that. Very happy with it. I'm going to be getting the prototype sometime next week. I'll show it to you, keep you guys updated as of the developing news. Now, going back to the question, it's very valid given everything going on. People want to know, okay, how long do these last? Is there an expiration date? How often should I be replacing it? Okay, let's start with the more simple stuff. Surgical mask, the surgical mask, as I explained before, it's not officially any kind of filter, so keep that in mind when they're telling you about the benefits of this. Officially speaking, there's no institution, no rating of any kind, and there's no expiration date, and there's no indication as of how often should you be replacing this, because this is really intended for your dentist to use while working on you and not spit you in the mouth, and basically that's it. But once these are disposable, single use, you put this on, you take it off, you throw it away. As it gets dirty, you just dispose of it. This is not even rated as any kind of filtering of any kind. So yeah, so much about the magic of the surgical mask. Now this is, as I explained in the previous video, this is here rated as an FFP2 face mask or filtering material. This is going to be filtering 95% of the particles, as I explained in the previous video, but right next to it you see NR. That's non-reusable. This means that these are disposable. Same thing here, NR, non-reusable. You have to dispose of these as soon as you use them. So how long can you start using these? Well, there's going to be different takes on this. Usually I've heard most often that every 4 hours or even 8 hours you should be replacing these, throwing them away. I know of many places in which they use these for a full day and then they dispose of these, all right? But basic idea is these are disposable. Now that would be in the correct use as intended by the manufacturer. Truth is that these have been reused many times, and one of the things that seems to be somewhat successful, again, take this with a huge grain of salt, but it's been used with a UV light so as to expose it to UV light, so as to do best attempts as to sterilize the surfaces of these and use them again. That is not advised, that is not recommended, but it's something that is being done given the lack of this type of material. With exposure to direct sunlight for a few hours of good intense sunlight, direct hit on the surface, that is going to be somewhat successful at sterilizing those surfaces. Now, how long can you keep these in terms of expiration date? Do these expire? Well, in theory, there's nothing here to expire because there's nothing that should be going bad. This is more of a structural filter, so it's like a net that's going to be trapping those particles. As long as the integrity is okay, even though sometimes you have an expiration date of like 5-10 years or whatever, as long as the mask is okay, the material should keep on filtering. In fact, the more it filters, the more efficient it becomes at keep on filtering more and more material. It gets to the point where it gets clogged and it's harder to breathe in, or if it gets very dirty, sure, that's the point for you to replace it. If you're gonna be going beyond the non-reusable, which is single use. But the material itself should not be expiring. In fact, I would be more concerned with the rubber band getting old, brittle, and breaking. That's a lot more likely to happen. Of course, you can replace that, but in a nutshell, the particle filter should not be going bad on its own. That same philosophy applies to the filters that you have in your particle filters for your masks. So this is a reusable particle filter. You can use it many times, and they do come sometimes with, or I'd say most often, they do come with an expiration date. That is more like a guideline, because I insist, unless the structure is compromised, broken, brittle in any way, it should keep on filtering. These you could keep on using for for a very long time, and it's going to be depending on the environment in which you are. If you're sanding stuff all day long and in a very dusty environment, breathing in and out all the day, maybe these last just one full day, until it gets clogged and it becomes difficult to breathe. That would be the guideline. That's something that I've read in many in many little manuals for filters, is you replace it when it's becoming difficult to breathe. The more it continues filter, the particle filter, the more clogged it gets. Actually, the more efficient it becomes at filtering even more and more particles, and even smaller ones. So it becomes more efficient as a filter the more you end up using it. So the rule of thumb in this case is they shouldn't be going bad unless maybe you get them wet, or you broke them. Something broke the material that's supposed to be filtering. Unless something like that happens, I've heard of some cases in military masks where the glue went bad after a few years and it started to detach. That could happen. So if it's very, very old, I'm talking about several decades old past its expiration date, maybe be a bit more careful. But with newer ones, you should not have a problem. I would try to avoid getting anything that's from unknown source, maybe wet, kept in damp conditions, and maybe something growing in. As long as it's sealed, I'm happy with that, even if it's a bit past its theoretical expiration date. Now, there's a little bit of a difference between what it's a particle filter. These are going to be filtering particles, even though this is disposable, non-disposable, these are reusable, but all of these filter particles. When you have one of these masks with the larger cartridges, these have particle filters and gas and vapor filters. Now, besides the particle filter that shouldn't be going bad, the vapor and fog and gas filter, that is compromised by is composed of a container full of activated charcoal. Now, the way in which this works is that those gases, fogs, and vapors go through it and start getting attached and stuck along the activated charcoal. So once that activated charcoal is saturated, it's no longer efficient at filtering those gases and fogs. So in theory, if you look at, for example, a 40 millimeter canister, a NATO filter, that is supposed to be only good for 1 hour exposed to fallout, some of the worst conditions of a nuclear blast type of thing, right? That is not something that we're mostly dealing with here. So it's the case that you may end up using it a lot more than just for 1 hour. This one is supposed to be a huge improvement. The GSR filter was supposed to be a huge improvement over the 40 millimeter NATO cartridge, because this is rated to last 24 hours of exposure to fallout. Okay, so 1 hour, 24 hours. Now, that being said, we're not in a nuclear holocaust here. We're talking about, most likely, you're thinking of the pandemic, and you want to know if this is good. Yes, of course this is still good, because the particle filter stuff, again, that is most likely intact. It keeps on working. And besides, the way in which you test the gas, vapor, and fog filter, the part of the activated charcoal, is you can actually test it with deodorants, with any smell. For example, I put this on and I don't feel any kind of smell from alcohol, bleach, perfumes, deodorant. Nothing gets through this. And these have been open for years now. Right? This has been open for years, and it's supposedly getting more saturated the more you use it and the more time goes by. I've been using it for a very long time. It's been open for years before that, and it is still absorbing and filtering those vapors and gases. So there's no golden rule here, so as to have a very specific date. Ideally, check the expiration date of the original packaging. That's going to be giving you somewhat of an idea. But keep in mind this: if you put it on, you test it, and you don't feel any kind of smells from alcohol, from bleach, from deodorants, then you are pretty safe to say that this is still filtering those gases, vapors, and fogs, and still being efficient at that. Keep in mind the use that this is actually intended for like biological and chemical weapons type of thing, the kind of thing that even a small droplet or particle getting through may end up getting you killed. So that's why these are so tightly regulated in terms of how efficient they are. 24 hours, sure, under those conditions. Normal conditions, or maybe a little bit less than normal conditions, like with the pandemic, this is still very much good for a very, very long time. Obviously, way beyond beyond those 24 hours. Likely, you can use it for maybe even years. Now, of course, the mask, you still have to remove the filters, clean it with a certain frequency, maintenance is still there, and the filters can still deteriorate. So ideally, every few months, if in ideal conditions, you would change it more often, but realistically, you can probably use this for a very long time and be very safe with that. Guys, I guess that's going to be giving you more of a clear picture as of what works, what doesn't, and how you should be going about it, especially with the stuff that is disposable. Some of the stuff that isn't disposable, this is maybe one of the best bargains because you're going to be a lot better protected with this because of the seal, as I explained before, and these last for a very, very long time. No, it's very unlikely that anything starts growing in here. Keep in mind that air flows in through the filter and goes out through the valve, so all the humidity is not getting stuck here. This is going to be actually very dry when using it properly without getting it wet, from rain and such. So this is going to be staying dry, and that's one of the things that's going to be killing anything that gets caught in here very fast. Guys, I hope that made sense. Remember, there's my books if you're interested in this type of survival and preparedness, street survival skills, and the Modern Survival Manual, following the links below. See you on our next video. Have an awesome day.